All right. Are we ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk about it. Database Lifecycle Management. We are here to talk about that today. We're going to be doing a full webinar, including demos and all kinds of fun stuff. My name is, do we have intro slides?
We do.
Okay.
There you go.
All right, hey, look at that. My name is Grant Fritchey. I work for Redgate Software. This is my contact information. We're going to try our best to answer any questions you have today, but if you have questions going forward, you can get in touch with me. Send me email, go by my LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, swing by the blog, whatever you need. I will try to help you out. I will try to answer your questions. If you do have questions today, please type them into the questions window that's part of the GoToWebinar system, and we will take care of those questions as they come up.
Thank you, Grant. And my name is Arne Iskandari, and I've been with Redgate for just over 5 years. My main responsibility as a technical sales engineer is to work closely with our customers on the implementation of our DLM solution within their environments, as well as providing insight on best practices around database change management and delivery. So here's my contact information. So if you have any questions around setup or topics that we don't get to cover today, feel free to reach out. So as part of the webinar today, we'll go through a couple of slides to quickly recap the main challenges around database change management, and following with the demo of our tools. So a quick intro to Redgate. A lot of you are existing users of some of our tools, but I'd actually like to run a quick poll at this point to see how familiar everyone is with Redgate and our tools in general.
Okay, so I've launched the poll. It should come up on the windows now.
Yep.
Select any and all that applying. I'm starting to see votes coming in now.
Great. Yeah, so for those of you who are new to Redgate, we specialize in SQL Server tools, specifically for developers and DBAs, and have been around for just over 16 years now. Our goal is to design SQL tools that can help overcome common challenges faced by SQL Server shops every day. And some of you know Redgate through our community websites. You know, you see SQL Server Central, Simple Talk there, where you can find thousands of free articles and training material on SQL Server.
All right, so I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share it real quick so people can actually see the results. Of the people who voted, 77% voted. Almost everyone uses Compare. Shock. A lot of source control, DLM automation, and some of the other tools. Excellent. All right, so I'll get rid of that and should go back to you, Arne. Excellent.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. So today we're basically going to, so this is one of our monthly webinars from the DLM series. So each month we focus on, you know, different, you know, integration of our DLM solution with different source control systems, build servers, and release management tools. And today we're going to focus on the integration of our DLM solution with Git as a source control system, TeamCity as a build server, and Octopus Deploy as our release management tool. And we'll also focus specifically on, you know, the migrations feature of SQL Source Control, where we'll get to show you how you can, you know, deploy a specific database schema changes or data migrations where a compare engine may not be able to handle properly. So we have the recording of our previous webinars available online on our website. So if you go to red-gate.com/library, here you can see basically all of the webinars that we've done so far, as well as some useful ebooks, articles, and white papers on the topic of DLM and some other topics as well. So you can easily filter by type, and you can find our webinars here as well. Okay, great. So now let's talk about the challenges with database change management. So we all know that managing database changes and deploying them is not as simple as swapping old code with the new one, right? So databases carry state and hold business critical data that needs to be safely preserved. And this is one of the main reasons why databases are normally left out of the application lifecycle management process. And as a result of that, there's a lot of manual steps involved with the delivery of database changes in general. And here are some of the common challenges that we see database shops facing every day. So databases are out of pace with application development. This is obviously mainly because of those manual steps involved in the delivery of your database changes, starting from gathering change scripts from all developers, making sure that they're in the right order and that those changes are not going to result into unintentional data loss or any other types of ugly surprises. And this obviously results into deployments taking up a lot of dev and DB hours and becoming less frequent and risky because you end up shipping larger units of changes every time you deploy to higher environments. So with DLM, we basically follow the same principles of application lifecycle management, and the focus here is to help build repeatability into your delivery process, where you are continuously testing the production readiness of the changes that you apply to your databases. And the main principle here is really deploying small units of changes every time. And obviously that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to deploy all the way to production every time, but deploying small units of changes all the way to your staging environment, where you are testing the production readiness of your changes and reviewing those changes multiple times before they even hit production. A lot of DBAs are normally required to review thousands of lines of the scripts at release time, which can take up a lot of hours depending on how many issues they find with those scripts. So basically, by committing database changes to source control on a regular basis, you can then, that opens the door to automated builds and tests to make sure that all of those small changes are tested and validated multiple times before you're even ready to deploy to your next environment. So, and this report from 2016 State of DevOps is actually pretty relevant here. So IT shops who utilize best practices such as version control and continuous delivery deploy code 200 times more frequently and with more confidence. And that enables them to become more agile in their software delivery process and makes the company twice as likely to exceed their goals and profitability. So how can Redgate help here? Here's basically a diagram of the whole end-to-end process, starting from development all the way to operations. So starting from the left side, the developers work with the databases, make changes to them. Here we have a bunch of developer tools that can help you, first of all, get your changes into your desired source control system, so such as Git, TFS, Subversion, or any other source control system that you might be using. And we also have a couple of productivity tools, so SQL Prompt, a lot of you are familiar with that. It's our version of IntelliSense and provides you with a lot of additional features, such as formatting code and help you guys write SQL so much faster. Once the changes are in source control, then using your, so one thing I forgot to mention here is the way that we store changes in source control. So we follow the state-based model, where we keep track of the state of your objects as they change in source control by storing the create scripts, and then we rely on the compare engine when it comes to generating the actual change script or the update scripts that should get executed on the higher environments. Once the changes are in source control, then you have the option to run automated builds regardless of build system you're using. So today we're going to be focused on Team City, but we do plug into any build system that does accept PowerShell or Windows Bash commands as a command line. So as part of the build process, we basically validate the scripts that you have in source control, the objects that you have in source control, by comparing those create scripts from source control against a temporary empty database and trying to build a database from scratch on that temporary database to make sure that there are no broken dependencies as a result of the changes that you've put in source control or any SQL Server compilation or syntax errors. If that build succeeds, then we go ahead and package up the database files from source control into a NuGet package that can be used as a source of deployment when going to higher environments. And then we have so our CI component there can help you configure the build steps. So we have a plugin for majority of the build systems, such as Team City, Jenkins, TFS, both 2015 and 2013. And we also have the release component, which can help you define and configure the release steps going to your higher environments. So there are a couple of options as far as the way that you can configure your releases. You have the option to put in a gated deployment where someone can review the deployment script as well as a visual report of the differences between your NuGet package and the target environment. And if they're happy, then they can move on to the execution of the script to that next environment. And once the changes are deployed to production, we have a couple of monitoring tools here. So DLM Dashboard helps you detect drift on your higher environment. So if someone makes a direct change to any of your higher environments, you can be notified through email. And we also have SQL Monitor, which is our performance monitoring and alerting tool. But we won't be able to cover that part, the SQL Monitor part of it, as part of this demo today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and start the demo here. So I'm just quickly going to switch my screen. Anything you wanted to add, Grant, before I get started with the demo?
No, I'm working through some of the questions right now. You want me to interrupt you with any of them, or just keep going?
If you feel like they're they're relevant to what we're talking about, then totally. Otherwise, we can leave. Yeah, we can leave that to the end.
Greg Wilson's got a tough one here. Will the problem be addressed when you have to add a field in a table and have that same field referenced in the stored proc? Currently, this change is implemented in the same transaction and therefore doesn't work. It has to be broken out. Will this be fixed?
So is that, are you referring to the migrations feature? I'm assuming you are.
No, I don't think that's migrations he's referring to. What he's saying is that, and I might be interpreting it wrong, so if I am, forgive me, is that we're not, in the compare engine, we are not capturing that change correctly. It kind of surprises me, but that's what it sounds like he's saying, is that we're not capturing the change correctly, so that if there's a field in a stored proc that we're not making the changes. That's an odd one. I'm going to have to test that one. Honestly, I'm going to say I don't know, but I'm going to test that, and I will try to get back to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
No, keep going, and I'll handle the other ones that I can.
Okay, great.
And if stuff comes up, I'll interrupt you.
Okay, sounds good. So hopefully everyone can see my Management Studio okay. So our SQL Source Control plugin that I mentioned earlier plugs into Management Studio, and it creates a bridge between your databases, specifically your development databases, and your source control system. So as you can see here, we support the main source control systems, Git, TFS, SVN, Perforce. So I'd actually like to run a quick poll to see which source control system you guys are using or looking to use for your databases. We normally find that majority of shops either use TFS or Git as their source control system, and it actually helps that now you can also have access to Git through TFS as well. So I'm curious to see if we see the same result today.
It's looking about the same. I'll close it here in a second.
Sounds good.
80% voted. Oh, still votes coming in. Cool. I'll wait a couple more seconds here. Yeah, it looks like everyone who's going to vote has voted, and I will share it.
Perfect.
There we go. So, hey, look at that, Git and TFS. Although Git is ahead of TFS, I usually see the reverse, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, exactly. Especially that this was focused on Git.
Right.
Probably have more Git users. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, and great.
I'll hide this, but a quick question. You're not covering ReadyRoll today, are you?
No, we're not.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I did not think so. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So the database that I'll be working with today is the Fabric and Fiber Dev database here. So this represents my development database, and because I have everything on a single machine, I also have these other databases here that represent my higher environments that I'll be deploying to, so testing, staging, and production. You'd notice my database icon is green. Now, a lot of you are already familiar with SQL Source Control, so my apologies if you are familiar with most of the stuff that we're going to cover. But you notice my database icon here is green. This is an indicator of the database being linked to source control. So as I mentioned, I'm using Git as my source control system. And obviously the workflow with Git is that you have your local repository as well as the remote repository. So I'm using GitHub as my remote. And I also have a local repository that I'm going to commit my changes to first, and then I will be pushing my changes from there to my remote. I've actually set up a small, a simple branching strategy here. So if I bring up SourceTree, which is my preferred client tool for Git, I have a couple branches here. So I have a branch called master, which basically holds everything. I also have a specific branch for the project that I'm working on, so project A. I receive this question almost every time from customers where they're working on multiple projects on the same database, and their question is, how do you go about, creating those isolated environments for each project, and you cherry pick the changes from a specific project to be deployed as opposed to all changes that have been made by all project teams. So this is one way to do it, and I'd say the best way to do it is to have a specific project branch and commit the database changes into that branch and then merge them up to master whenever you're ready to build and deploy. And that's what I'm going to do today. So I'm currently on my project branch, so I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of changes here to my database and get those into my branch and then merge them to master in order to go to my higher environments. So if I go to my Commit Changes tab here in SQL Source Control, so this is basically looking at what's in my local repository and what's on the dev database and tells me if there's anything I need to commit. So currently I don't have any changes to commit to Source Control. So I'm going to go ahead and make a schema change here. Now, normally I would make a store procedure change and a lookup data change, but then the audience would ask the question of, okay, so how do you do more complex changes such as refactoring tables or schema changes that also require some data fixes? So for that reason, I'm going to actually make a refactoring change to one of my tables here today. So I have this clients table, and here in the columns I have a first name and a last name column, and would actually like to merge those into one single column and call it full name. So I'm going to go ahead and write my script. Actually, I do have a script just to save us some time here. So I have this merge columns script that I'm going to execute on this table. So I'm adding the full name and then getting the data from the first name and last name columns, putting in the full name column, changing it to non-null, and dropping the first name and last name columns. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and apply this change to my table, and as soon as this change is made to your database objects, you'd see the blue blobs appearing next to the object. So this is a visual indicator that you have a change to commit to source control. So I'm going to go ahead and try and commit this to source control, so commit changes to source control. And this is where it gets interesting. So, so here at the bottom, you can see how the object definition is being modified in source control. So as I said, we store the create script in source control. So you can see we're removing full name, replacing it, we're removing first name and last name, replacing it with full name. And here at the top, you'd notice SQL Source Control throws a warning saying that these changes might cause deployment errors or data loss. So as I mentioned, we rely on the compare engine to do the deployments or to generate the update scripts. And this is a type of a change where compare may not, wouldn't be able to handle properly because it will not see the data portion of it. All it will try to do is to, update the schema of the table, but it will not know what to do with the data unless we add a migration script to tell SQL compare specifically what to do with that specific object. And that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to add a migration script. And there's actually two types of migration scripts that you can add to source control. You can start with a blank script, mainly for data migrations, so pure DMLs that aren't associated with any schema changes for data fixes or anything else. You could store those as blank scripts, and those will get executed as one-off scripts when deploying to your next environment. So I'll talk about how we keep track of what's been deployed and what hasn't been deployed in a little bit. And the other type of migration script is for migrations associated with specific objects that you need to check into source control. So here I'd like to basically override the default behavior of the compare engine for this for the changes that I made to the clients table. So I'm going to go ahead and select the clients table, and I'm going to say generate script. And this is going to give me the script that SQL compare will run on the target. And the way it's doing it is it basically creates a temporary table, copies all the data to that temporary table, modifies the columns and everything, and then copies the data back. But that's not going to help us, because even if it copies the data back, will still result into data loss because of that refactoring change that we made. So I'm going to get rid of the script generated by compare, and I'm going to replace it with the script that I executed for that specific table. So I'm going to copy this and save it as a migration script. Now you could put if exists for the table around the script, but for now I'm good with this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And now it's basically telling me that there is a migration script covering the changes that were made to the client table. So this still shows us how the structure of the table is going to change, and here's the migration script that is going to cover that change that we made. So I'm going to go ahead and write my check-in comment here. So merge columns, first name and last name into full name on clients table. All right, going to go ahead and commit this. So here's basically a default warning, but we already took care of the default data using migration, so I don't need to worry about that. So this goes ahead and commits it to my local repository. Here you can see it also gives me the option to push to my remote directly from within SQL Source Control, or you can do your pushes through either the Git command line or a Git client tool, so whichever you prefer here. So it's here you can see, it's showing the new change that I committed to my local, and I can go ahead and push that either through here or SQL Source Control. So I'm going to go ahead and push this to my project A branch in my remote, and I'm also going to merge this into the master branch, so that way it can trigger a build, and we can start looking at the deployments of this change to higher environments. So I'm going to go to my master branch, and I'm going to take the latest and merge it to the master, and I'll push that to the master branch in GitHub. So, so here's the folder structure that we use to keep track of your changes to your database in source control. So there's a subfolder for each type of object, and then within each of these folders we store the create scripts. We also have a folder for the custom scripts. So these are the migration scripts that you would write for your database objects or the data migrations. So there's a subfolder for each type of migration script that you write. And we also have a deployment order file, which keeps track of the order in which those migration scripts should be executed. So by default, we order the migration scripts in the order they are created. But if for any reason you want to change the order, you can modify this file in source control, and it will go based on the order that you specify here. So since I pushed my changes to the master branch, that's going to trigger a build in my CI environment. So just quickly bring this over here. So here's Team City. You can see that my project, my build project already started here. So as I mentioned, we offer a plugin for TeamCity which makes it easier for you to define your build steps. It's basically a wrapper around the PowerShell or the command line. And here you can see my build actually failed. So I'm going to look into this and see why my build failed. So let's look at the build log here. And it looks like my validation failed here. And here is the error. So it's complaining about an invalid column name, first name, and last name from this stored procedure. So basically what happened here is I made a change to the table but broke a dependency, so that we have the stored procedure that was dependent on that table, and now it's broken. So, and for that reason my build failed. This is actually one of the benefits of doing builds this way, is that you're not, one thing that we see with databases a lot is that accumulation of that technical debt with broken objects and invalid objects that you just that stay in your database, and you never get a chance to clean them up. So by following this process, you're always sort of making sure that there is no broken dependencies or any invalid objects as a result of the changes that you're making to your database. So now I need to go back to my database, fix that object, and put it in source control and run another build before we can look into deployments. So I'm going to go to my stored procedures here. Modify the stored procedure that the build was complaining about. So here's the broken script. So I need to replace this with full name and apply my change. You'd also notice that I have a lock icon next to my database object. This is another feature of SQL Source Control. It's a locking feature mainly used for shared development databases. So if there's multiple people making changes to the shared development database and you want to make sure that no one touches an object while you're working on it, you could use this locking object feature here to simply say, I want to lock this object. And then when you visit the locking tab here, it will show you what objects have been locked by which developer, which user, and when. But you have the option to unlock any objects regardless of who locked it, so it's more of a communication tool than anything else. So I'm going to go back here and commit the fix that I put in for the store procedure. So and I'm going to, so here notice I'm basically committing directly to my master branch. So, so that way, just to save us a bit of time here. So this is getting pushed directly to my master, which is going to trigger another build in TeamCity. So there is one pending, and it should get started any second now. While we're waiting for this to complete, I'll quickly show you what my build definition and the build configuration looks like. So
do you want to run the poll for this
one?
Oh,
yes. Yeah, it's actually a pretty good time to do that. So yeah, we're going to run a quick poll to see what build systems you guys actually have in place or are looking to implement within your development shop. So TeamCity is definitely one of the popular ones. TFS is becoming more popular now, especially with the 2015 version that they pushed out, where now you can easily define your build definitions without having to deal with XAML templates. And you can also do releases from the same UI. So we've seen a lot of people moving to TFS as a result of that. So let's see what the result is from today's poll.
Still coming in.
Sounds good.
Yeah, Steve, I have not worked with TFS build, but Steve walked me through it in some detail a while back, and it was pretty amazing. I was impressed.
Yeah, yeah, so was I.
No more votes coming in. I'm going to go close it off and share it. and not surprising, TeamCity,
Yep.
TFS, and Jenkins.
Yep. Yep.
Cruise Control, sadly, has lost all the love. All right.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So yeah, so here are my build steps. So as I mentioned, we offer a plugin for TeamCity and some of the other build systems where you can easily just go in and configure your builds without having to write any PowerShell or Windows Bash command. So here's basically my build step. It's pretty easy to configure. You're basically pointing it to the right source control folder where your database subfolders are, and specify the name or the ID for your NuGet package that gets generated, and where you want to do the build. So you have the option of doing the build on an actual SQL Server instance, such as your dev instance. Normally, if you have cross-database dependencies, we recommend doing the build on an instance where those dependencies exist, so that way the build process can validate all objects. But if it's a pretty straightforward database without any dependencies or anything like that, you could also use SQL Local DB, which is SQL Server Express that gets installed as part of our automation components on your agent box or your build server box. We also nicely integrate with our DLM Dashboard, so I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So DLM Dashboard, as I mentioned, is our drift detection tool where it can actually keep track of what changes have been pushed to which environment and where those changes have come from. So we haven't done any deployments to any of my higher environments, so there's nothing interesting here to see yet. But once we start doing deployment, I'll come back to DLM Dashboard and explain what we're seeing as part of this UI. So besides the build step, I also have a couple of additional steps. So I also utilizing the test step from Redgate SQL CI, which is relying on two testing frameworks. One is called SQL Cop, which comes with a set of out-of-box tests that you can use to test different things on your database. There's a couple of tests that you can run for naming conventions for your database objects, some performance tests such as fragmented indexes, and as you can see, there's a lot of different types of tests that you can utilize as part of SQL Cop. And the other framework is T-SQL-T, which is a unit testing framework. Both of these frameworks are third-party frameworks available as open source. What we've done is we've integrated them into a single tool called SQL Test, which makes it easier for you to interact with these two testing frameworks and be able to run the tests from within Management Studio and even create new tests. So T-SQL-T is a unit testing framework, so it provides you with all these objects here that you can use to create unit tests on your database objects. So there's a bit of learning curve with T-SQL-T because you need to learn about what these objects do and how you can utilize them. So they do actually have a good website, which is tsqlt.org, where you can take a look at some of their work examples and user guides on how to work with T-SQL-T. So if you're utilizing any of these two frameworks, then you can run the test step here to automatically run this test as part of the build process. And finally, I'm using the third step. So I'm using the NuGet publish step that comes as part of TeamCity to send the NuGet package to my Octopus Deploy NuGet feed. So Octopus Deploy has its own NuGet feed where it stores the NuGet packages that are built as part of the build process. And then you can specify your releases based on a specific NuGet package when you're doing the deployment. So I'm simply just taking the NuGet package, putting it in a different location. So we're not really doing any deployment as part of this publish step.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Absolutely.
There's a question here that I don't know the answer to. In Source Control 4, I can create migration scripts for changes that have already been committed. But in the demo with Source Control 5, it appears that is not an option. Is that correct? If a change is committed, then they realize that a migration script is needed. Can they create one?
So for that, you would probably need to go back and apply an empty migration script, so without associating it to an object. Otherwise, the only way to associate it to an object is to yeah, it would have to, there would need to be a change to the object where it would pick up as something to commit, and then that's where you would get the option to add the change or assign the migration script to the object. Otherwise, it would have to be saved as a one-off migration script.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So if I look at my projects here, you can see my build succeeded, which resulted into you know, a NuGet package. So if I look at my artifacts here, here's my NuGet package. It basically stores the same folder structure as what we have in Source Control, and I'm going to use this NuGet package as a source of deployment going to my higher environments. So, and that's what we're going to take a look at next. So I'm going to switch to my release management here. So Octopus Deploy again. I have a project here, Fabric and Fiber, which is used specifically for deploying this Fabric and Fiber database to my testing, staging, and production environments. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new release. And as you can see, my releases are configured in a way that is taking the same package number, same version number from my NuGet package, and my NuGet package gets the version number from the build number. So I can easily associate, you know, NuGet packages and releases back to a specific build and specific changes within that build. So I'm going to go ahead and save this release here and start up by deploying it to my testing environment. So I'll go ahead and trigger the deployment, and then I'll walk you through the deployment steps that I've configured here for my environments. So if you look at the process here.
Want to do the survey right now?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so let's do a survey to see who, if you guys are using any release management tools, and if so, which ones they are.
Okay, it's coming in. Quite a few votes. Good number anyway. Other. I'm surprised. Okay, slow down. Let's go ahead and close it and share it so everyone can see. Octopus Deploy is number one. I'm not surprised, but other people are using some other DLM software. Interesting. So there we go.
Excellent. Thank you, Grant. Okay. So here are the steps that I've defined for my deployments on this project. So as part of Octopus Deploy, we actually provide a set of step templates that you can use that uses the PowerShell commandlet of our components in the background. But the good thing is with this templates is that you don't really need to write any PowerShell. So you basically just simply fill in these fields in order to define your deployment steps. So going back to my steps, here are the steps that I've defined here. Obviously, this can be customized and you know, based on your requirements when deploying to any of your environments. So what I'm doing here is, first of all, obviously extracting the content of the NuGet package, and then start off by creating a database release. What this step does is that it runs a comparison between the NuGet package and the target environment that you're deploying to, and generates a report of what is being deployed, so a visual report of the differences that exist between the two, as well as the actual script that will run on the target environment to do the deployment. Once that's done, then you also have the option to you know, put a manual intervention in place. So this is that gated deployment that I was talking about earlier. So as you can see, I'm only doing the review for my staging and production environment. For my testing, I'm skipping step number 3 and going directly to step number 4, which is the execution of the update script that we generated at step 2. So obviously there's a lot that you can do or add to this, you know, such as backing up a database as a step, or, you know, comparing your staging database against production to make sure that they are actually synced before you deploy to staging, or even steps in order to generate rollback scripts, or, you know, on on your changes. So I could basically take the same create database release, switch the direction of the comparison going from target to my NuGet package in order to generate a rollback through. But obviously that has limitations, right? So if you've made some changes to a column or dropped a column that resulted into data loss, then obviously that rollback cannot be done automatically. So you would have to do something after the rollback in order to bring that data back by either using our data compare from a backup file against a database to bring the data back, or something like that. So there's definitely some limitations to what you can roll back and what you cannot as part of the automated process. So if I go back to my dashboard, let's see here. Oh, looks like my deployment failed, so let's see what happened here. This always happens to me. So every time I modify any of my steps, for some reason it automatically goes in and puts specific user details in there instead of using Windows authentication, and that's what happened here. So I have to create another release. Let's do 3, 4. And deploy that again. So the good thing about this is once those reports that I mentioned are generated, they are stored under the Artifacts tab in Octopus Deploy, where you can basically keep a nice audit trail of what was deployed as part of each release. You can easily go back to your previous releases and look at the artifacts on those releases. Another great thing about this is if you want to go back to a previous release, you could simply pick an older release and redeploy that to any of your environments. And what SQL Compare will do is that will compare the NuGet package from that specific release against the current state of your database, and will give you a new update script to apply to that environment to roll it back to the previous release or whatever release you're interested in rolling back to. So some of you, 19% of you mentioned that you're using other solutions or tools for doing deployments. I've come across customers who actually use their build system to do deployments as well, so such as TeamCity. So that's totally fine. You could utilize the PowerShell command list of our release component in TeamCity to define your deployment steps. But the nice thing about using a release management tool is that it gives you this centralized dashboard of your releases. You can actually version your releases, add your environment, and know exactly what was deployed to what environment at what time.
Hey, Arne, you need to address this one thing.
Sure.
Two people both brought up the same question. You talked about having a rollback. How does the rollback deal with migration scripts?
Yeah, so the rollback doesn't handle the migration scripts automatically. So because the compare engine is not intelligent enough to look at a migration script and figure out what it needs to do in reverse to roll it back, especially if there is data involved. So the rollback of those type of changes will need to be done manually, or basically we call it roll forward. So you would basically have to write another script that would take the database back to the original state. What has your experience been like for these type of things, Grant, or what is your recommendation for when it comes to rollback?
Well, it'll take 2 minutes to describe. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
All right. So my experience with rollbacks is it occurs one of two ways. If you hit a situation where something is broken, by and large, you're going to roll back immediately, and that means you're going to use you've either taken a snapshot of the database if you're on enterprise level, or you've taken a snapshot at the SAN level so you can recover that way, or you've just got a backup and you're going to run a restore. That's that immediate, oh my God, things broke when we deployed, let's fix it. That's usually the mechanisms used. What then happens is that you deploy, it looks successful, it passes the basic tests, it goes out, the people are using it, and then you find that there's a problem. You generally then don't use a rollback, you have to do a roll forward. We've built this whole mechanism of managing code through this deployment process, through testing, and automate it all through there. If you find that you've put something out that you need to undo, you undo it through that same process. So then a roll forward, and that's 99 times out of 100 or better. That's usually how you deal with it. Either it's broken right now and we just undo what we did, or it's broken later and we will have to do a new deployment to fix it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Grant.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, so here is basically that report that I was talking about earlier. So here it basically shows me what objects are basically, what differences exist between the NuGet package and the target database that we're deploying to. And so on the client table, you can see this is the difference in the structure. So we're following the Git style here to show you what's been added, what's been removed from the script file or the definition of the object. And here's the stored procedure. So you'd notice that although we basically ran 2 builds on for these 2 different changes, and obviously we ended up getting 2 NuGet packages, but your most recent NuGet package always has non-conflicting changes that were made to the database in previous builds, or builds that you haven't deployed to any of your hiring environments yet. So you don't need to take multiple packages and trying to deploy them to your environment. You simply pick the latest one that you want to deploy, and that package will have the non-conflicting changes that you had made in previous builds to your database, because we store the state of the database in package as opposed to individual changes. And here is the warnings tab. So if there's any changes that could result into data loss, or hadn't I taken care of this change, the change to the table through migration script, I would see a warning here saying that this change will result into data loss. So I need to have to go back and either add a migration script or take the script and modify it manually in order to avoid data loss to my database. So here's basically what it's doing. So you notice it's adding a checking for this deployment metadata table. This is the table that we use and we add to your target databases to keep track of what migration scripts will executed on your target and what migration scripts we need to execute as part of this deployment. So this table gets added to any of your target environments that you deploy to through this process, and based on a comparison that it does to this table against what's in source control, it figures out what migration scripts it needs to execute. So if I show you what that table looks like on my testing environment, so here's the Redgate's deployment metadata, and here's the history of migration scripts that have been deployed to this environment. So it basically compares these records in this table against what we have as migration scripts and figures out what it needs to execute now as part of the deployment. So there is only one outstanding migration script that it needed to run. So here's the start of the migration script for the clients table, and here's that script that I provided to the compare engine to take care of the changes that I made to the clients table. And once it's done, then it updates the deployment metadata table to add that migration script. And then here it's taking care of the deployment to the script to the stored procedure. So any changes or schema changes that you don't specify migration script for, it will automatically go ahead and generate the script for it. And you've noticed that it actually took care of the order of the dependencies as well. So it deployed the table first, and then it did the stored procedure. So by associating a change to an object or migration script to an object, you can actually see that review dependency step in here as well. So yeah, so this is everything is encapsulated into a single transaction. So that way, if anything breaks while executing the script or fails, it will roll back the transaction for you. And that's actually customizable as well as part of the compare options. And so yeah, so these report is saved as an artifact, as well as the update script itself. So you can always come back to specific releases and see what was deployed. And from here, you can see my deployment to this testing environment was successful. So if I go to my table in the testing environment, and if we look at the data, we should have full name there with the data intact. So there it is. And it's basically the same process going to my hire environment. So since I deployed to my testing environment, if I go to my DLM dashboard, you can actually see my DLM dashboard is saying that there is a change applied to this testing environment. And there's two types of changes that DLM dashboard can detect. One is an update, which is represented by this icon here. The other one is a drift, which is represented by this drift icon here. The reason why it's noticed this as an update, recognized it as an update, is because we provide the state of the database that we build as part of the build process to the DLM dashboard. So that way when that state gets deployed to any of the hire environments, DLM dashboard has already seen that state as part of the build, so it knows that it's coming from the build and that it's not a drift. So it's coming from the release pipeline, basically. And if I go to the review here, I can actually see what type of changes have been applied to the database. So there's one table change, one store procedure change, which user or account, ran those changes against the database. And here you can see how the definition of the object has been changed, as well as the actual scripts that were executed against that object. So here's basically the individual transactions that I ran. So if I look at this one, here's the first line of my script. So the rest of the lines are within these scripts here. And the same to the store procedure. So you can see how the definition of the store procedure has changed. And if you want to see the actual script that was executed, again, you can hit this download SQL and it will show you the alter script that was ran against the database. So if I go ahead and make a direct change to my database now, it will change it to a drift state because it's a change that it hasn't seen in any of my lower environments or the build process. So it will see that as a drift, and then you can set up a notification to send an email to the DBAs or the specific people in charge of those environments, so they can look at it. And if it's something that was done intentionally, such as a bug fix or a hotfix, then you need to make sure that that same schema change has been applied back to the development environment.
Hey, Arne?
Yeah.
I got another question that I don't have an answer to. He said someone says the version dropped back to 2.9 from 3.1 before updating to 3.3. Do you know what was going on there? I didn't notice that, so I'm just passing it along because I don't have a good answer.
So on the, let's see, on the.
Or do you have separate versions running?
Oh, on the DLM dashboard?
That's, yeah, I assume so. I think that's what he meant. I suspect it just means that you haven't run all the captured changes.
So when I say acknowledge changes, so it will update it to the latest here. So, but yeah, it's still showing. Oh, so this is the history. So this is basically where it was previously. But it's interesting that it's showing 2.9 as the latest. There must be something wrong here. Yeah, I would have to take this offline. This is actually the first time that I come across this. So yeah, you're absolutely correct. It should show 0.33 as the version, but it's for some reason showing 2.9. So I'll look into it.
I know what it is. You probably, and someone already made it in the comments. You probably made the same changes before. I've seen that. When you're doing demos, and you make the exact same changes over and over, and then capture those as previous versions. In theory, that should never happen in a production system.
Right. Yeah.
Let's hope that they're not making the same changes over and over again to production. That would be kind of weird.
That makes sense because I tested the changes that I made previous to the demo to make sure that everything works perfectly. So that makes total sense. Okay, yeah, so we only have 5 more minutes here, so I'll actually stop the demo now, and basically we can see if there's any other outstanding questions that we can answer at this point. Are there actually any outstanding questions, Grant, that we need to answer at this point?
I've attempted to answer all of them. There's one that came up that I'm positive I didn't satisfy them on, and that was what about server changes, server triggers, users, and all that stuff, and how do we manage that, and does Redgate have a tool for that? I already answered it in line, but if you want to add your two cents, I'm sure it won't hurt.
Yeah, unfortunately we don't have the option to include the server level stuff such as jobs or server level users and or anything that is not at the database level. However,
we've actually our tool set.
Directly through our tool set, yeah. Well, actually we've seen a couple of customers who've used the migrations feature of SQL Source Control to do those type of things, so apply scripts to update jobs and things like that as part of the same release pipeline. So, but yeah, besides that, we don't really have anything as part of our tool set that can help you. So it would have to be done outside Redgate, basically.
Right. Some more questions are coming in. I'll just go ahead and ask them now. So we've got a couple of minutes. They don't do CI deployment. Is it possible to just collect a stack of changes to include in a monthly or more often release with code fixes?
So without a CI process, I mean, you would have to have some sort of method of packaging up this into a deployment package. If it's not a deployment package, then it has to be a specific source control repository or a source control folder that you would be doing the comparison from. So you would compare directly against source control, and then that would basically pick up whatever has been committed to that specific source control branch or source control folder and compare it against the higher environments in order to do the deployment. Otherwise, yeah, I can't think of any other way to do it. Grant, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to have a CI process. Yeah. It's preferable, but you don't have to have one. So what do you do then? You have to have some mechanism, hopefully, of validating that the changes that you're doing are going to work before you take to production. That's all. It's not so much that, do you have to have a CI process to put together? No, you don't. But you still need to have some kind of, let's put it all together and run this script one time, at least one time, before we go to production. Exactly. In the purest possible terms, if you're running a script for the very first time anywhere on your production server, you are making a horrible mistake, and you will pay for that at some point. It's the only way I can say it. You need to validate stuff before it gets to production. CI is just a way of automating validation. It's not a requirement for any of these processes. So could you do what he's requesting? Absolutely, yep. But you're still going to want to have a test mechanism set up.
Yep.
And then they want to know about incorporating data changes only into this process as opposed to any kind of structural changes. And the shortest possible answer I have, well, go ahead.
No, go for it, Gary.
No, you do it.
Sure. So one of it, as I mentioned earlier on, was to use the data-only migration scripts in SQL Source Control. So let me just quickly switch my screen here so I can show you what I'm talking about. So for data-only migrations, you could use the migrations feature here to basically start with blank script and then save those DMLs as data-only scripts that will run as a one-off script on the target environment. The other option that we have for specifically for lookup tables or configuration tables or reference tables is the link static data option in SQL Source Control, where you can actually keep track of data changes that you make to your reference tables in Source Control, and then any data changes that are made to those tables are deployed to your hiring environment by doing a data comparison between those tables that we have in Source Control and the same table in the target environment. But the main requirement here for this feature is that you would be deploying your data has to be the same going from dev all the way to production. So if there's any data differences or your production reference tables don't match the development reference tables, then this feature will not work. So, but yeah, so you have those two options here for data scripts or deploying data.
Okay, let's see. Someone asked for the GitHub repo, if you can post a link to that.
Definitely, yeah. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Okay, and we got one more minute, right? Let's see if we can answer one more question. Multiple branches, that's already been answered by Steve. Is there a way to get the Octopus deployment steps to skip if the DB version isn't changing? Interesting question.
So if there's nothing to deploy, basically?
Yeah.
So it would still have to do the comparison to see if there's anything to deploy. If there's nothing to deploy, then your report will have a single line saying there was nothing to deploy, but there is no way to figure out, whether or not there is something to deploy without doing the comparison. So you would have to do the comparison as part of the deployment.
Although Steve answered that, then the step completes quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then the question has come up if it came up around Octopus. Is there a way in Octopus to deploy to multiple databases simultaneously? And then the last question came up again. What if we want to deploy the same package to hundreds or thousands of databases?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So the only way to do so, if we're talking about thousands of databases, then it depends on what stage those target databases are at. If they're all at different states, like if we have customers all on different versions, obviously what would need to happen is we would need to compare against each database to generate the actual script that would be relevant to that database. But if they're all on the same, at the same stage, and you can basically take the same script as a result of comparing against one of the scripts and execute it against all the other databases, you can actually do that using PowerShell. You can just compare against one database, generate the script, and then take that script and then execute it against basically the rest of the databases without having to do any further comparisons. But if you have to compare every single one of those databases, then obviously that's going to take a lot of time and may not even work as a solution.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing I would say is if you are looking at thousands of databases and they're potentially in different states, that becomes very attractive for something like ReadyRoll.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's a different discussion at that point. Okay, we are out of time and we've answered almost all the questions. So.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thanks everyone for joining us again today. I put up the slides here, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be looking forward to hearing from you soon.
Great, and thanks everybody for attending.
Excellent. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Appreciate you diving in there on some of those questions.